Yes. The City Council Committee on Ordinance, License, Legal Affairs, Co-Posted Committee of the Whole met in council chambers on Thursday, October 10, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. for the purpose of discussing matters listed below. Notice this meeting was posted on, revised on October 8, 2019 at 3:12 p.m. Absent is, 1, 2, 3. No member, all the members of the committee here, not being a member of the committee, Council Fury, Council Gerard, and Council Peterson. The first matter in front of us is Council Order number 422. We're in possession of a letter from Councilor Flynn withdrawing his intent to amend the traffic ordinance. So if I could just have a motion to accept the letter. Second, motion by Councilor Milo, seconded by Councilor Medor. And with that, tonight, as under committee reports, once we take the vote, that will mean that there won't be a second passage of the ordinance, so therefore Beaver Street will stay the way it is for now. So everyone's understanding. So any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, all those opposed? Matter carries. Next group of ordinances in front of us are 370, 371, and 372. 372 really can't be acted on until you act on 370 and 371, but it's on the agenda. So the first matter in front of us is Council Order number 370, amend zoning ordinance relative to accessory dwelling units. With us this evening we have the mayor, Amanda, and Tom from the planning department, members of the public. Anyone else from the city here? Beth, and I'm sorry, Beth Renard, the city solicitor. For the record, I sent an email out to my committee relative to this. Also, for the record, let it be known that this meeting is being recorded by SATV. It's not going out live. The council meetings go out live, but this meeting is being recorded. It's on SATV. I sent an email out to the committee members relative to putting this on the agenda only because, the schedule's busy, and I understand there's some conflicts within the committee about being able to come to a meeting earlier in the week, and I understand that, but at the same time, as I know the council president just put out something about, and I have no preconceived notion on what the vote is going to be on this. All I'm going to say is that to schedule a special meeting and we're backed up against the timeline on this, and we already have a joint public hearing the second week, and unfortunately it falls after the deadline for this to be passed. So in order to have a special meeting, we either have to have 2 full meetings in the same week, or if we did it the week before, then we're backing up against the election, and I know the city clerk has a lot to do with pre-election stuff and then post-election stuff. So I put it on the agenda for tonight to have a discussion about what's in front of us, and maybe if there's a will to take it, move it, bring it out, or to keep it, that's up to the committee, so I'll leave it in the hands of the committee. But right now we have, if seeing no objection, I'll open it up to either the mayor or Tom or Amanda to let us know what the recommendations were back and what the changes were from what we heard during the public hearing.
We're going to take a team effort on this.
More the merrier.
I'll try and just start with and I want to be conscious of time, so I'll try and just start with the timeline. We are up against a crunch time deadline. As members of the council know, this is a zoning change. A zoning change requires adoption twice, first and second passage. Under state statute, you're required to adopt for final passage this ordinance within 90 days from the close of the public hearing. That puts us at November 13th. So final action needs to be taken by November 13th. There's 2 meetings in October, which is good news, so we can get first and second passage, and 1 meeting in November. Unfortunately, the November meeting falls after the 13th, so it would not suffice to meet the deadline. If we don't act within that 90 days, the proposed ordinance dies in committee without any action. It would be our preference, given the outpouring of support we've seen for this ordinance, and we know the housing challenges that we have in Salem, that we act on this ordinance and do so hopefully tonight in a manner that will enable us to at least get first passage. As Councilor McCarthy pointed out, I believe there's a meeting set up for October 23rd of the OLA committee. where further action, amendments, revisions could happen, and then final adoption could happen at the second meeting in October on the 24th. I've had a chance to talk with many of you. There's certainly some of you have indicated you just don't support this ordinance. This isn't something that accessory dwelling units are not something that you see as imperative in Salem, or you like the ordinance the way it is, and I understand that. I do hope that the committee will vote to advance this, even without a recommendation, so we can take this up on the floor. My fear is by not doing that, we're effectively killing it, because we don't know about availability for special meetings. We're running into Halloween, we're running into elections. You've got to have 7 days between those meetings, and I just think we're going to run out of calendar. That would be a real shame. We began this discussion as a result of those large housing forums we had, and we asked people to rank what were the housing policies they wanted us to focus on. ADUs was the top of the list, accessory dwelling units, followed by leveraging public land, followed by subsidies and looking at tax exemptions. So I'm really hopeful that we won't allow this just to not advance and not allow for a vote to be taken, so we can just see where people are at. If it fails, I understand that as a potential, because I'm not really sure where the votes are. I think we're close. We'll have to refile it in January, or work to try and put something else in place. But just allowing it to sit in committee when we've had literally 100 people in here at one time supporting this ordinance, from the CEO of the North Shore Medical Center, senior vice presidents of banks, small business owners, restaurant owners, the GM of the hotel. You guys were many of you were here for that, so there's a lot of support for allowing this housing alternative in Salem, and I'm hoping that we can at least get it to the floor so that we can have a thumbs up or thumbs down on it. And I'd like the opportunity for us to amend it further, which we can do at the October 23rd committee meeting. There aren't major changes that are proposed by the planning board. I'll allow Amanda just to go through them quickly. They're for the most part not substantive. One of them talks about this 2-year limit and the 2-year limit for for owner occupancy. But I want to call out that I've talked to some of the members who have indicated to me they prefer that accessory dwelling units really only apply for owner occupied properties, and that is something that I think we'd be happy to incorporate into the final language if this committee so wanted, or if members of the council so wanted. We don't think that's a game changer. Right now, it's owner occupied for 2 years, and each successive owner is allowed another sort of a fresh 2 years to start. If members of the council want this to be for owner occupied properties only, that is something that we think, frankly, makes some sense, and would appreciate the opportunity to see that. We have language that would accomplish that. So the 2 years issue becomes a little less pivotal if you want to make it owner occupied only. The last thing I'll just point out is the affordability provisions. Right now, the zoning ordinance allows ADUs. As you know, we allow ADUs, but only in places where it's for a relative or a caregiver, and when that need no longer exists, you need to dismantle that unit. That's pretty costly. We haven't seen many of units created. I think it's less than 10 or less that we're up to. In terms of new ones that are actually created, it's even less than that since the ordinance has been in place. We share your concern about wanting to do everything we can to incentivize affordability. It is really hard to do that in a zoning ordinance, to require the affordability component, because of some of the hurdles and hardships that requires DHCD permission, deed restrictions. What we'd like to do is be able to incentivize affordability in these, and thank you. I want to thank Councilor Dominguez, who's raised this issue with us, and we've been working for the last several weeks to identify how we could incentivize this, and there's a couple of ways we've come up with, both loan pools. If we are loaning money to individuals, for instance, from CPA dollars or from a bank pool of resources, you can require an affordability provision like we do with our housing rehab program. And we also think there are options for us to have exemptions for ADUs, a property tax exemption for the square footage of the ADU, if in fact it's used for as an affordable unit. And that is something that Lincoln has done. That requires a special act. So we'd have to file something in addition, but we're totally committed to trying to do that and putting that in place. And I think those are things that I think this council would support. And it would have the added benefit of spurring and incentivizing people to create ADUs. In addition to those incentives, we're hoping to have a compendium. So a compendium of resources. If you owned a property, we'll have sketches on how, if it's a raised ranch, how you might be able to convert space to an ADU. Or if it was a cape, how you might be able to look at a conversion. If it was a garage, here's some ideas of how you can make this come alive within your property, and then here are some resources that might be able to help. But in essence, I hope you realize how important we think this is, how critical the timing is, and that we think first passage tonight will enable us first getting it out of committee, and then first passage tonight will enable us to put in place a housing tool that we think could be really valuable for people who live here of all ages, young adults looking for housing, seniors who are overhoused, and giving people some options to create more units that just by their very size are likely to be lower in cost and provide alternatives for people who live and work in Salem. Happy to run through the planning board changes, and maybe only the major ones. You guys, the planning board gave these to you on September 5th, so I'm sure you've had a chance to go through them. They're fairly minor, maybe just anything that stands out.
Right, so there are a couple changes to the purpose statement. You'll notice that moderately priced was X'd off of that, and that was in response to the planning board listening to public comments, and there was concern about that language being vague. They added a new purpose statement, which doesn't change the intent of the ordinance, but it clarifies it's to increase the supply and diversity of housing options in response to demographic changes, such as smaller and older households. They tightened up the application language. They really just cleaned up the application language. Instead of listing the same thing twice, we had application for a building permit, then application for a special permit. They just said application for a building or a special permit. Just shorten that language a little. Under requirements, as the mayor mentioned, for the owner occupancy, they had recommended that 2 years resets at the point of sale. So if a new owner occupies the home, then that owner has to live in there as a primary residence for at least 2 years. And again, that's to avoid flipping this type of house. And then they cleaned up the language on the entry, just clarified the entry location shall be through an existing entry or the back, and then deleted the rest of the sentence there. And those are the key changes to the substantive changes to the ordinance.
And I've got copies, as we mentioned. There was some discussion from counselors that we've had one-on-one who were preferring owner-occupied. The ADUs only be permitted if there was an owner-occupied unit. That would remove the 2-year language. So we've got some proposed verbiage as to what that would mean for the particular ordinance that we're very happy to pass around to each side. It's pretty straightforward. It essentially takes out the 2-year requirement and just adds in that these are only permitted in owner-occupied properties.
If I can? Mm-hmm. So that's on page 2 under section 4 requirements under bullet E.
Correct.
Yep.
So that I prefer that myself, but I'm just speaking for myself.
Yep. There's the language. We had heard that from folks. We wanted to provide an easy way to have that language incorporated.
Actually, I have one more. Thank you.
We're obviously happy to take any questions. And again, I just want to stress the timeliness of this. This is an issue that you had, lots of folks coming to. You'll see the chamber's packed with a lot of people who I think are supportive of ADUs. It's really hard for people to continue to come, every single meeting to advocate for these things. And this is one of these common sense tools. The American Planning Association is pushing this. There are states who allow whole ADUs as of right, statewide legislation. Vermont, California, many other jurisdictions are recognizing the benefit of existing infrastructure, an existing home being used to create an accessory dwelling unit, not anything too large, but something that can accommodate individuals who are really challenged by the high cost of housing. And we know over 50% of renters in Salem meet that need. And as I shared with you during the public hearing, just finding units for people when they're displaced. The awful fire we had on Cromwell Street, we could not find other two-bedroom units for less than $2,000. That was just June, right? June, I believe that happened. So there's a supply and demand component to this, as well as a real desire to try and better utilize the infrastructure to accommodate our housing challenges. And we hope you will act tonight. If you do not act tonight without a special meeting, this thing's killed. And that feels like a lot of time, energy, and resources that end up with a result that I don't think anybody wants. We want to try and find a way to get everybody on board with this, not try and find a way to avoid voting tonight.
Thank you. Council Milo. Yep, please.
Okay, all right, thanks very much. Mr. Chair, through you to the team. When I look at the ordinance that's on the books currently, if you look at the,
A little feedback, I don't understand
Yeah,
that, but that's fine. Just, we'll kind of go through it.
all right, I'll try to stay away from it. When I look at the termination conditions, we'll call it, for the ordinance that's on the books, and I look at the termination conditions for the proposed ordinance, they don't look dissimilar, and I know that there was a mention of having to disassemble something. I think, May, you mentioned something about having to deconstruct, currently having to deconstruct, and I don't see that here in the current ordinance.
Well, in the current ordinance, it's only permissible to be used if in fact it's for a relative or a caregiver. So if you're renting out that unit to somebody else, that would not be permissible. And my understanding of how the ordinance has been interpreted is that if you are not renting out a unit that you created for your relative or caregiver, because that's the only caveat that is allowed to use it, then you are required to dismantle it, deconstruct it. It is not a permittable, it's not an occupiable space to be rented out to anybody else.
That's not what I'm reading here.
Well, that's how the current ordinance is interpreted. That was created by the council to ensure that it doesn't become an accessory dwelling unit. I mean, there was discussion at the time of not having that caveat be in the ordinance, and it was rejected. That was 2 years ago by the council. And so if it's not, your occupancy permit is conditioned upon it being a relative or a caregiver. So if there's not a relative or a caregiver living there, you cannot use it.
So I get, Mr. Chair, if I can through you, I'm just looking, geez, what the,
Yeah, I don't know.
is it just mine? This is what I'm looking at, and maybe you can help me with it, okay? So under the duty of, under the current ordinance, A, the owner shall discontinue the use of the accessory living area of the separate dwelling. B, the kitchen facilities of the accessory living area shall be removed unless determined to be incidental, et cetera, et cetera. And it basically reads the same thing under the proposed ordinance. So I understand what you're saying about not having relatives or caregivers or stepchildren, step whatever. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that the current ordinance does not say it has to be dismantled. If it's.
My understanding is if you have a unit that is only allowed, an accessory dwelling unit that's only allowed under the current requirements, which is a relative or a caregiver, that it cannot remain in place if a relative or caregiver is still living there.
Can you help me with this? Because maybe I'm just not understanding the current ordinance, because that's not what I'm reading. Am I?
So the special permit runs with the owner, with the homeowner and the tenant. So if there's any change to that tenant and homeowner, then that special permit is no longer valid. And therefore that second unit, the accessory unit, is no longer valid.
I understand that.
So that's where you can't have a unit that cannot be used.
Right, and it outlines what has to happen upon termination here.
Right.
Yes.
So what's the part, so it's in the current.
So it just, yeah, it says, kitchen facilities of the accessory living area shall be removed unless determined to be incidental. And it's the same exact language in the proposed
But
one.
under the current language, you don't have to be a caregiver or a relative, so that it would only come out if you weren't meeting the requirements of the ordinance, which in this case aren't limited to who occupies it.
Right,
So-
but either way, whether it, under one,
Well, under one, you have to be a relative or a caregiver.
Yeah.
So, under the other, you don't. So,
But my point is that either way, you don't have to dismantle them, you just have to discontinue use.
well, you can't occupy it as a
Right,
separate.
exactly, yeah, and they both read the same way. But, Mr. Chair, I'll yield. You know, it's,
That's fine. Council Dominguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the mayor and the whole team for, providing some answer some of the previous concern. Under the occupancy piece right now, the 2 year are mandatory, or we can try to increase it to 5 years to be in compliance with the same time of the first homeowner piece that we have already in place, trying to avoid that any any powerful developers might take over and might, control something that we looking for to be a piece that help the most needed one.
I mean,
Possible?
we're definitely open to changing it from 2 to 5, or from eliminating the 2-year requirement at all and just saying you have to be owner occupied. So 2, 5, 7, it wouldn't matter. You're only allowed to have the ADU if the owner occupant lives in the space, which would eliminate any, potential for an investor-owned property to enter into the fray, because it would have to be owner occupied. And that might be an example if you weren't in compliance with that, where the unit couldn't be occupied. But as I said, we're open to that change. We understand that's something that folks have mentioned to us as of concern to them. The planning board looked at it, was okay with 2, but this is the opportunity to amend that.
Councilor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not being a member of the committee, just looking at the existing ordinance for the ADU for relatives and caregivers, and the language appears to be the same except for C and D are combined. The clause C here, and termination, duty of owner upon termination, that has the same stuff that C and D both have in the existing ordinance. And then there's also a requirement to record a notice of termination in the registry of deeds and deliver a copy to the ZBA, presumably because it was a special permit. But other than that, the exterior entrance permanently closed unless the building inspector provides a waiver, that's in there. And the kitchen facilities shall be removed unless determined to be incidental subordinate as an accessory use. It's also there, the same language.
You all set? Councilor Fury.
Not being a member of the committee, over the years, I have been in accessory units. Each of my 5 BCF children that I adopted over the years love living in. They love living in a family-style home. So these units were great, each and every one. Myself, and excel into this young son of mine, life, reality. While it's time to take clear hold on accessory units, it's one of many tools we can address the health issue. This is an election year. We need to take an affirmative action. How we have a human face. Each of the large city council forums, each of the 8 city councils said housing was their top issue. Well, it's time to put up or shut up. We cannot defer or delay this critical issue to accommodate some of the housing needs of few. It would be a deep injustice to the voters, and they are listening, and they are watching. And come November, I believe they will take action. Like those people in the city council who defer and delay, put in committee, study, and research, the voters will show their disapproval to this deep injustice of keeping it in committee delaying. This is the last time to issue it this year. To defer and delay is a sin, and moral sin. Each of us has a moral compass. This is not allowing anyone to elect a boss, delay and defer this issue. And I believe we should take action tonight and seal it. The election is coming in November, and the voters are watching and demanding action. Defer, delay would be a sin. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one second, Council. Beth, did you get a copy of this? Could you hand it to Beth? Yeah, one for the record, thank you. I know this is for me personally, this was kind of a point. Does that language, I mean, came from someone in the planning department and so on. Will that language, I'm usually loud enough. Will that language satisfy the way it's written with respect to, it says dwelling is a primary residence for voting and tax purposes? Is that typical, the way we would really write that, or do you have another suggestion? 'Cause I firmly believe if someone's going to be putting an accessory unit in their residence, they should be living in it, not for the duration of when it's occupied, not for any time period. So would that satisfy that requirement?
I think it is. I think there's more thought to it.
Okay.
Between process and capacity, that was the.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Dominguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I wanted to express my support to any tool that we can bring to the table to alleviate the situation that we have in Salem. But I had to say that I believe that the voters of Salem bring us to this position to discuss the matter. I'm not afraid to say that I would like to see more debate on any given topic, especially on this one that is very important. I represent a community that is being hit by not having affordable housing in Salem, and I want to see real affordable housing. So I understand that some people want this to happen quickly, but when you have something important in front of you, that depending how many people are going to be living in Salem, you have to take the time to do it right. I disagree with the good Councilor Allard mentioned the election time. I think that if the voters voted for me to be here, is for me to ask the question, to debate the issue, and also to make sure that we had the right decision. If we cannot we are good understanding, everybody understand, I don't think we don't fulfill the purpose of why we was elected. If the voters of Salem decided not to vote me in because I make a decision based on the ability of me asking the question or debate the issue, I'm fine, because this is what I was voted for. 2-year term, 3-year term, 4-year term, whatever amount of time that the voter want to give me, I'm fine. But I wanted to make sure that we understand this is our duties. We need to discuss the issue. The issue needs to be discussed, and I've been listening, I've been hearing that from day one. We wanted to pass it, we wanted to make it happen, but no matter how long it's taken, we need to make sure that we do it right. I wanted to see some real affordability on this piece, and I wanted to take the time. And I don't know if it's time to make a motion, but I want to make a motion, and I want to be very clear. I understand that we might jeopardize something, but we need to find a way to discuss the issue, make sure that we all in compliance and we make it the right way so we deliver the right result to the people that need it the most. I've seen people leaving the city of Salem every day, coming from my community, and I don't want to hear anymore that we trying. At the end of the day, nothing's happened. We need to make it happen. How are we going to happen? We need to bring real results. So I wanted to discuss the issue. I want to be clear. I had a lot of questions, and I wanted those questions to be answered. Thank you once again to the mayor and the planning department to bring some clarification the owner occupies, but we have other issues that we need to discuss. If we don't discuss this, believe it or not, if I had to say no as something that I understand that we need it, I'm going to say no, because I'm not clear in some issue. I need to be clear. So that's what I want to say, and thank you so much.
Councilor Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not being a member of the committee, I have 2 questions. First is also to this new language that we were just handed, related to kind of jumping off the question that you had, Mr. Chair, for Beth. So where it says primary residence for voting and tax purposes, voting, would that preclude people who are not citizens or not voters from participating?
May, I think the intent was that, so if when you pass something here, you say my permanent resident, I live in X place for X place. So I think the purpose of this is to allow perhaps snowboard for all the families who may go to Florida and still be qualified. Is that correct?
This is the language, I believe, that comes from how you define a principal place of residence. So it's certainly not designed to impact anybody who may not be able to vote, and that would not affect them. It's your principal place of residence. That's the first part of it. This is just some evidence of that, but it's not the only evidence of that.
Okay. So I'm not in the committee, so I can't adjust that at all, but maybe somebody could. But I also wanted to, through you, Mr. Chair, to the team, Mayor, you had mentioned about the language that would be possible and the different additional tools that would be possible. Can you please just clarify whether those can be actually added into this here, or whether that's a next step after that we can't pursue until this is passed.
Sure, really good question. And we did provide a memo to all the counselors. Amanda has done a really good job outlining and summarizing what those tools would look like to create that affordability that I think we all want. And they cannot be inserted into the language of the zoning ordinance. I want to separate out, the zoning ordinance allows the ADU to be created. The affordability component are incentivized by a special act around the tax exemption. That isn't part of a zoning ordinance. That's a separate action by the council. And the loan pool, in terms of pooling those resources, is something the Affordable Housing Trust Fund would do. We have active interest from the banking community to contribute to that. So we think there's certainly ample opportunity to have options for individuals who do want to rent out their units. The thing to think about, the deed restriction of having a unit in perpetuity, there are some restrictions on that in terms of annual certification with DHCD, not being able to rent to a family member if you're using some of those HUD funds, so that it's counterintuitive to what we're actually trying to achieve. That's why we haven't incorporated it into the zoning, but there are separate programs, that language that we, as I mentioned to you, Councilor Dominguez, we're happy to provide you to move it forward so that the ADU is allowed, and now we create the lane of incentives for those ADUs to be affordable. But inserting it into the zoning body itself is definitely something that would handicap actually creating ADU units by virtue of that being the only way to do that. We think people actually wouldn't use it as much because of the regulatory requirements associated with that. Incentivizing it, we think, is the best option, which would also help us with folks who not only want the income, but also have an opportunity to reduce any impact that might come from actually bringing in rent, right? So you rent out your basement. We had a resident here at one of the public hearings saying, geez, is this a win-lose? I mean, it's a total win, right? You're going to get some rent, but yeah, you might see a slight increase in your real estate taxes as a result of the fact that you brought in some income. The exemption component of that's really critical. Lincoln is doing that. Like, this is coming out of the research, but that's not embedded in the zoning change. You've got to allow the ADUs, and then the tools get layered on top.
Council Milo, I'm sorry. I saw your hand and I acknowledged it, and I'm like,
Somebody had their hand.
Yeah, I know.
I'm gonna try it again. I don't know how this is gonna work.
that's okay.
The incentives, could they be used if there were additional ADUs created under the current ordinance?
I think they could be. I'd have to really look at the provision of the requirements for residents only. Like, some of the grant funds that come from HUD, they want it to be an arm's length transaction. They're not going to give you low interest dollars to create a unit that you rent below market to a family member. Or I think there's also people who work for you. So we'd have to really understand how, if there was a limitation on that.
Council Maduro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to formulate my question or comment through you to the team. I think under Section 5 special permit, excuse me, I have a cold. Under Section 5 special permit, subsections B and C, it indicates that the ZBA may grant certain waivers to allow under some certain conditions. So I wonder if we could add some language to indicate an additional waiver if the applicant could comply with certain incentives or some regulations or policy that we set forward as part of this incentive package, and then build in some kind of waiver that is directly tied to that, and we can add that now without being specific to this loan program. Is that possible to you and maybe the city solicitor as well?
I think you could probably add it under the provisions of what the zoning board would take into consideration. Like, maybe you would add F, affordability, being a component that you would add there. I'd really want us to spend some time chewing on what that language is to make sure it's accomplishing what you want it to. So some of the factors that are considered for granting of the waiver are laid out. Another factor in granting a waiver could be affordability, right? The fact that you are going to take advantage of those tools to create a unit that would be rented in an affordable manner.
Mr. Chair, if I may continue. Subsection C, perhaps that could be built in that language to say grant certain waiver to allow the ADU to exceed 800 square feet of habitable space, taking into consideration peculiarities of the layout of the primary dwelling, or if the applicant or application meets certain conditions, blank this package, this incentive loan package.
You could add it there as well. I guess I'm just trying to be mindful of what we're actually trying to achieve with that waiver, so, yeah. Those would be the two areas, it would either be F or C, but honestly, if the board was willing to vote this out of committee and adopt first passage, we could work on that language, get it back to everyone for the October 23rd OLA meeting, which still puts us in the position to make sure this doesn't die as we work through that affordability provision. Wait, I think what I'm hearing you're saying is you'd like the ZBA to consider affordability as part of a special permit request if there was a special permit. Is that correct?
Certain waiver. I think the waiver is the carrot.
Okay.
And we're trying to figure out what the stick looks like.
All right, I hear you. Yep. Yeah, sure.
Councilor Dominguez, then Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, in the incentive piece that you just mentioned, that might be part of the ordinance. Is there any way that we can have any type of tax break for the owner?
Yeah.
Is there any limit, any number that you can mention to help alleviate that? And second question, after you answer me that one, is that who will regulate that we have affordability on those units? We understand that we are assuming that it's going to be affordable, which is very, very understandable. The site, 800 feet, might allow to, but the way rent is going up, you never know what control we're going to have. So who will guarantee that me, as a landlord, might not be able to rent at a market rate a small apartment that gives me some income?
So if we want to provide an exemption to the property owner who creates the accessory dwelling unit, that requires a special act, much like we just did to expand senior property tax exemptions beyond the circuit breaker. We know that Lincoln has done that, so we think that is something that we can put in place. The council would have to vote on that separate act. It would go to the legislature, and we think it could get in place by the end of the fiscal year, traditionally how they work with home rule petitions. So that is how it would work. It would not be incorporated in the ordinance. It's a separate action. Even we can't even do it unilaterally. It does require the legislature to enable you to grant an additional exemption, which they've already done once. So I can't imagine why we wouldn't be able to follow that same pathway. In terms of, okay, if we're talking about not only that incentive, but also whether it's a loan pool incentive, this would be something that we would anticipate using much like we do the housing rehab program, where there would be staff who would be reviewing the creation of the unit, ensuring the affordability either by the rent or by the income of the individuals who live there. Those are the two ways. HUD requires low mod, so this is a little bit different in that we could either use low mod or what's the 60% AMI rent requirements. We'd really want to spend some time understanding we'd really want to be thoughtful around approaching that, but it would be our staff who would have to take that on, and then there'd be a deed restriction placed on the property as part of the incentive, much like the housing rehab program works right now. If you get a housing rehab loan from the federal program that the city administers, you have to show income restrictions for the individuals who live there, and you have to also put a deed restriction on the property that's in place, depending upon what program. Some of them are 15 years, some of them are in perpetuity, some of them are shorter. So we'd be comfortable doing that. Only allowing ADUs to be created for that is where we run into problems, because the administration of a program like that with the DHCD requirements and the deed restriction for the individual becomes problematic. But if we're giving the incentive the dollars, now it makes a lot more sense.
If I may, it does make me assume that if the homeowner is no longer living in the house, the incentive already died with the ownership. If the unoccupied is no longer exists.
Correct.
Take away the
unit is taken away too, right? So you can't, if you decide you don't want to live in that unit anymore, you would have to sell it in order to maintain the accessory dwelling unit, right?
Thank you.
Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to clarify that point that raised by the mayor. You can move it, you guys do it.
Absolutely. One or the other, correct.
Mr. Chair, there's not a lot of time here tonight. We have a meeting that's going to go long tonight.
Yep.
But I'm willing to yield because this is an important matter. I want to thank the mayor for,
I want to thank the mayor for putting the time in and reaching out to us. I spoke to 3 or 4 counselors over the last 2 days on this matter, and I asked, is it 2-year resident, owner occupied? Is it 3 years? Is it going to be 5 year? Is it going to be permanent forever? Or is it not at all? And is it only in R1 that we're going to do this? Or are we going to do it to all 4 residential areas? Nobody that I asked of my fellow counselors, I won't point them out, including myself, nobody knew where we were going to go with this. So we weren't on the same page yet. It's not our job to accept things from the mayor and the administration and just approve it. It's our job to ask the questions and try to work together and to come up with the best product possible for the city. I think we all know that. So we're asking questions. I asked the city clerk to double check to see if we could have and with the mayor as well, a timetable that would allow for this to be approved before the November 13th deadline. And yes, there is an avenue for this. The clerk was polling everybody, I don't know what the results of that is, for a special meeting on November 7th, or I think that was the date, that worked perfectly with the allowed advertising schedule and beat the deadline, and worked around the elections and everything else. So it is possible to get these questions answered. I don't like working at the last minute, but the questions need to be answered, and we need to be on the same page with whatever product we're putting forward, or at least a majority, to get this done and done right. So a discussion, not a handout here tonight about should it be owner occupied or not, and which of the 4 zones, RC, R1, R2, or R3, multifamily. Where are we going to do this at? We don't know for sure because we haven't really had the hard discussion on it yet. The original documents presented by the administration in the public informational meetings said that we're only doing this in R1. But now the ordinance prepared says all 4 zones. You yourself talked about dense neighborhoods along Derby Street, and it might impact the area. We have a few dense neighborhoods, dense portions of streets in Ward 7, but we have that across the whole city. How does that, and we haven't really discussed it, how does that affect these dense neighborhoods? We need to have that discussion, and we can easily do that. And putting some safeguards in here if need be, if it's warranted by this council. How do we prevent the units, rock solidly, how do we prevent the units from becoming condos within the same building itself and then sold separately? Do we want that? Do we want to allow that? We need to make sure we're on firm ground on that one. I just received a 5-page ADU document from the mayor and her administration right before this meeting is when I saw it. Came in today. I think we all got it. I don't even know what it says in there yet, but I'm being asked to vote on that tonight. Council, if I can. First of all,
I'm almost done, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I want to go through this. So if Amanda can take a couple of notes, and maybe she can, your team can address some of these issues. On the owner occupied, the mayor has it here, but the city solicitor should comment on the wording, as she already suggested that she would, that it's legal, the legalese is proper. The dense neighborhoods, the condos, it becoming condos and sold separately. So what kind of restrictions would be put on those? A deed restriction or some other means to protect the neighborhoods? Does the building code, another question, does the building code require this ADU to have 2 forms of egresses and to follow all the rules? We need to make sure that the wording on here is precise and so that it protects these units. Clearly, these type of units are needed throughout the city, but it's our job to do it and do it right. Should there be a minimum size of these units? That's a question we've never even tackled. It's been asked of us a couple times. 800 square feet, the maximum, which you can squeeze in 3 bedrooms, but the ordinance says only 2. So 2 bedrooms, maybe get a variance to do a third, I'm not sure, but that's not the issue. But how about the minimum size? Should be a minimum size. That's a question for our planners. We've never talked about it. There's a series of other questions I have here, but one was the loophole that Darlene Millis described at the early public meeting has never even been addressed yet.
So I proposed a special meeting to get this thing right and passed. I'm not in favor, and I explained this to the mayor this morning, that I'm not in favor of voting for something for first passage, sending it to committee, and then taking a second vote on it, because we all know the answer to that, Mr. Chair, is that if you vote first passage for something, then you put it into committee, you can't make changes to that. You can cross your T and dot your I, but you cannot make any substantial changes at all to it. So I'm against first passage. Let's have that meeting that you've already scheduled on October 23rd. Let's get this document and get it right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I may, just provide a little bit of a response to some of that, because I think it's really important that we operate from a position of facts with regard to what information has been provided to date. The memo that was prepared to the City Council and all planning board members on July 31st, very thorough. We've really tried to listen to you and provide information when requested, addresses the building code requirements, the egress, accessory units, and the multi-district. When we submitted this, it was not just R1, it expanded it to R1, RC, R2, and R3. That's in the original ordinance. Why was this included is listed out here. The issues with regard to restricting ADUs from becoming condominiums, that was a question, it was answered and prepared for you in the memo dated July 31st. There's a whole compendium of information that has been provided based on the comments that were heard at the public hearing, and we work really hard to get you that information, all of the councilors that information, so you can be in a position to vote in an informed way. That's since July 31st. Nobody wants to put anybody in a position of voting on something that they don't think they're ready for. On the other hand, the timeline runs out November 13th. We do not have a special meeting scheduled. I know there's been some calls made today, frankly, because I've been saying, when is this going to happen? And my fear is this times out after we've been spending months on this with lots of people supportive of this. I don't want this to be a hostile discussion. I think accessory dwelling units are something that will be positive for our community. The things that you've talked about are easily already provided information to you or easily discussed at the October 23rd meeting. We're not asking for final passage. And yes, in fact, you can make changes from 1 to 2. I think you're confusing perhaps the public hearing process and when that's closed, and if the planning board can hear from people. We make changes between first passage and second passage all the time. That's why you have to notice it and advertise it. So you can have major changes between first passage and second passage. It's not finally adopted until that second passage occurs, and we are running out of time. We have a really strong ordinance here. We have a few concerns that I really think are on the edges that folks have mentioned. At least I think folks were supportive of this. And we have some folks who don't want the new ordinance at all, and I understand that. But delaying this further, like, look around. People have lives. They have things to do. And they're coming out here to advocate time and time and time and time again. And every time we're here, it's pushing it down the road to something else. Now we're going to create a special meeting. I don't even know if my calendar's available. I don't know if your calendars are available. We need all 11 people there between Halloween and an election season, when we have 2 dates. We have 2 regular meeting dates. You have had this since June. We have 2 dates in October, 1 date in November, 1 date in December. And in the memo that we provided to you, which you have in your packets for this meeting, which we gave to you much earlier, there's several other affordable housing things we have pending, from the HDIP expansion to a zoning change. There are other actions that we need from you if we're serious about tackling these housing challenges. So I pay attention to what you're saying. We are trying to put you in a position to vote yes. It is all here. Let's not make this a fight. There's an opportunity to do it. Put it out of committee, get first passage. We have a meeting on the 23rd. Right now, I feel like we're doing all of the outreach. I'm making all the telephone calls. I'm trying to leave messages on voicemails and texts and rearrange schedules to talk with you about something that you've had since June. When we're providing information to your questions, we're putting you in a position to say, this is something that's good and I can vote for it. And now we want to have another delay and have a special meeting, not even knowing if the full 11-member body is available, for something that I think a large majority of Salem residents think is good. So I hope that we can put our best foot forward together and get a little bit, if it's a little bit out of a counselor's comfort zone, I understand that, but let's put ourselves in a position to do something good to address housing needs in Salem. vote it out of committee, give us first passage, we can work on these issues that you've outlined. None of them are game changers. We are trying to be responsible, and some of them we've given to you months ago. And maybe that it's so long and there's so much going on that you haven't had a chance to get to it, but we have been listening and we have provided it to you.
Council Terrell and Council Sergeant, and then I'll entertain motions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you not being a member of the committee, I'll just point out that Section 4G of this proposal just very clearly states the accessory living area may not be sold or transferred separate and apart from the principal dwelling to which an accessory use. The principal dwelling in the accessory living area shall remain in common or single ownership and shall not be severed in ownership. I mean, I remember that, that was clarified when the question about condos first came up, and, that answer at least has been crystal clear since we got final language on this. So it's really the answers to most of the things that people brought up are generally within here. I agree, there are provisions that I don't think are ideal. Not being a member of the committee, I can't vote or make a motion, but I do definitely support changing this to owner-occupied only as opposed to, and removing the 2-year requirement. I think that's a way to make sure that we don't have an explosion of investor properties that are convenient for people. I think it's an important part of this. So that there are things that we can do to this, but the basic context of this, I think we're on pretty solid ground. So with that, I yield.
Council Sergeant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, with great respect for Councilor Fury, I don't think that, I just want to defend the integrity of our council, all 11 of us. I don't think there's one person here who's going to vote one way or the other based on whether it's election time or not. Whether you agree with this or don't agree with this, I believe strongly in the integrity of all 11 people here, that they're going to do what they think is the right thing, regardless of what day it is or what time it is. I'm not in favor of this. Because there's so many different rezoning things and overlay districts going on in Salem. My main issue at election time is zoning. Housing is close behind, and I understand we need to have to help where we can. But you just need to get some of the basic rough facts out there. I mean, the state has a housing crisis. The state, I read in an article yesterday, wants to get their 10% affordable housing. Now that's on the backs of towns that already have, like we do, 12.4%, and Lynn 12.6%. You're not asking the Boxfords and the Hamiltons and the Wenhams and the Topsfields that have 1% and sometimes less to make more affordable housing. They want towns like ours to take on a lot of the regional, responsibility. I mean, we're 50% rental units, 12.4% affordable housing. We're 15th best in the state, and we should take credit for those numbers at providing affordable housing. We're better than 336 other cities and towns in Massachusetts. That's pretty commendable for a city to be in that place. We provide housing for our people, for the surrounding towns that don't have much affordable housing, for a college population that comes in to take over some of the apartments, and we understand that. And then for people that want to move to Salem and make Salem their place to live. We're doing our share. That being said, if one family is having a difficult time, of course we want to help. So, and there are ways around this. I mean, we have schools that are bought and paid for by taxpayers and parishioners that we can make into senior housing. Needy seniors can move into there. Seniors that are doing well, that want to sell their house and put some money in their pocket, can move into there. If we make a full circle of housing by doing that, we can take care of our most needy to our best and brightest. Because when that senior sells their house and moves into that housing, that house becomes available to a young couple. That young couple's apartment becomes available to somebody who needs it. Somebody from the project moves up into that apartment. I mean, sometimes we're providing housing for needy people and not one-family houses for our best and brightest and most successful people. And we should be taking care of every single part of our circle of housing. And that's what I just don't understand. And we also, there's a way to go about this with all kinds of different parts of it. Keeping contracts to places like Peakwater Highlands and Loring Towers, keeping them in place, and we work to do that. Right? Taking our Community Preservation Act money. I mean, how serious are we if we can use 60% of our Community Preservation Act money for affordable housing, and we're only using 10%? How do we get a housing crisis this year, but we didn't have one last year, 2 years, and 5 years ago? How do we get to this point? I'm not really sure how it did. On the housing trust fund, I've constantly proposed 10% affordable housing for new developers coming into town that want to build by right, and at least 20% for developers that come in and want zoning changes like this, special permits, 10 variances, things like that. They're asking more from our city, and we're not asking more in return. And I keep being told that developers can't afford more than 10%, right? We're going to give them density bonuses to go from 50 to 100 units, but not ask for more than 10%. How do we should be at least staying at our 12.4% or getting better, right? So in some cases, we're having people come in that are low-income people that can't afford affordable housing at $1,800 a month to ask for affordable housing, and it's not that. In some ways, it's a bait and switch. And then the affordable unit ends up only being 10%, so 90% of this is about market rate. And in many cases, market rate, it's about somebody living in Boston, it's affordable to them to come live in Salem because it goes from $3,000 to $2,000 a month, $2,500. And then we worry about gentrification. If you go over a school building and they're getting $2,000, $2,500 a month, the person in the three-decker down the street is going to say, I can get that too. And we're proposing to be helping people that need affordable housing, and in that case, they're going to get gentrified like South Boston and like Charlestown and like East Boston and like the North End, and they'll be driven right out. And eventually driven right down out of the point. I'm not done yet, right? And eventually, just like the point will get gentrified. Okay, so are we really trying to help people? If we are, we would do a much more diversified portfolio of providing affordable housing. So, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Fury, briefly, not being a member of the committee, we've taken up way too much time.
Some of us are forgetting our roots, and where we came from. This is an opportunity. This is not a silver bullet to solve the solutions of affordable housing. This is just one tool tonight. We spent 15 months of aggravated public meetings on St. James, Immaculate Conception, and the Council on Aging, the old one. Now, we're going to have an excruciating, detailed meeting. The cry and the hunger and the hue and call by the public and the voters want housing now, not 15 months down the line. I'm the only renter in this facility, in this council chamber. I see it with a human face. Some of us say that we lived in Rainbow Towers and lived in different places. We forget our roots. Boys Club, Girls Club were mentioned by certain candidates for public office. I lived in Rainbow Dallas, but I was homeless, my family. This is not a silver bullet. It's one of many solutions, a team effort. We've spent many hours. We've gone to Council on Aging, packed houses, and the new Council on Aging, calling for the hue and cry for housing. The voters will answer your call tonight by putting it in committee and delaying and deferring. 15 months of St. James. Council on Aging is a sin, and this will be a sin to delay and defer. Get it out of committee, give it a first passage, dot the i's and cross the t's. We're not lawyers. We're not going to solve the problem of housing in Salem. In fact, this was never meant to be the solution. This was just one of many solutions. As Councilor Sargent said, state and federal. This is just one solution. Give it a chance. The voters are listening, and they will vote with their votes. Thank you.
Take a motion from somebody in the committee. Councilman Dole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to refer this out of committee with a positive recommendation as amended.
Well, there was no amendment. Someone had to make that amendment first.
I will move to change, what section is this?
It's in 4E.
To amend section 4E as submitted.
Council Maduro moves to amend section 4E as submitted to require home ownership throughout, being a primary dwelling for the primary residence throughout. I'll second that. And for the record, my 12 years, I had to ask the question, and the chair can second. I never knew that, but I will second it. So Councilman Mador's motion on the floor is to amend section 4E as proposed, as submitted, seconded by Councilor McCarthy. All those in favor? All those opposed? It passes. Can I say that again? It's 1, 2. Council Milo was in favor. Council Sargent was in favor. You were in favor too? Council Dominguez? So that matter passes 5-0. So now, Council Mador.
I move to refer this out of committee with a positive recommendation as amended.
So Councilor Mador moves to refer out of committee as amended with a positive recommendation. Seconded by Councilor McCarthy. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? Which way? Opposed? Matter does not carry. So it's 2-3 against, so the matter shall remain in committee.
Is there an opportunity to make a recommendation without any recommendation, so it just gets to the floor? Otherwise, you are effectively killing this ordinance.
Motion. That was my motion, but that being continued. I made a motion that we made this motion.
Councilor Dominguez, hold on. Councilor Dominguez moves to send it to the floor. Councilor Dominguez moves to send it to the floor as amended with no recommendation. This is second. Seconded by Councilor Mador. All those in favor? All those opposed? That matter carries 3-2. I'll entertain one more motion. Well, actually, hold on. Before I do that, we need to also, the piggyback is the second one, which is the table, which would be Council Order 371. 372 is the 372 can remain because that one, you can't get rid of that one until you do the first one. So I'll take a motion on Council Order 371, which is basically the table of everything we just talked about. Council Mador.
I move to refer this out of committee with no recommendation.
Council Mador moves to refer 371. Out of committee with no recommendation. Seconded by Council McCarthy. All those in favor? All those opposed? 3-2. Now it's removed, just like the first one. With regards to, just for housekeeping, with regards to Council Order 370, which is the one I was just looking at, the last one. 372. That, someone make a motion to that one to remain.
Move to remain.
Councilman. Seconded by Council McCarthy. All those in favor? All those opposed? The matter remains. I'll entertain one last motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilor Sargent moves to adjourn. Thank you for your indulgence. 7:35.